How you doing, YouTube? Matt Massa Beer Reviews back with another Black is Beautiful beer. Yes, this time comes from the family over at Crown and Hops in collaboration with Weathered Souls, as most of these are. Well, all of them are technically, and comes courtesy of my boy Kyle. Yeah, he sent off some beer mails back my way. Some for me, some for my boy Keith, and yeah, I got this one. I'm kind of pumped. Because I follow these guys on social media. I don't know their history, but it almost feels like this brewery is born from social media. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that is, a couple that are kind of social media, I don't want to say influencers, because that's kind of douchey to say, but it's kind of into the beer scene and ended up opening a brewery, as a lot of people do. But they're on the West Coast. I've been following them for quite some time. They're out of Santa Rosa, California. And their take on this is actually a pecan pie stout, as you can see right there. As it says on their website, because it doesn't say in here. I wanted to look it up so you guys know. It's, I assume, pretty close to the base version of the beer. But the adjuncts are pecans. Brown sugar, blackstrap molasses, vanilla, and sea salt. So I assume this is going to come off decently sweet. Now you have that salt at play. You have the base of this beer, it's inherently a much more bittering beer than I thought it was going to be based off assumptions. But yeah, pretty cool. It's actually one of my more favorite Black is Beautiful labels. And you're like, okay, dumbass, they're all the same. No, they're not. Because you can see this one has this kind of cool iridescence to it that I don't think a lot of them have carried previously. There's something about it shimmers a little bit more. So I kind of like that. So take that. Crumbling on top of itself. That's what that beer is doing as far as the head goes. That's your adjuncts at play. And it's got that kind of like just north of khaki colored kind of malted head. And it's got a rich kind of dark color to it that definitely is all the parts of brown and mahogany. It's not super thick. It's not super dense. I can get a little bit of color around the edges, but it's got a nose. I'm curious about this one. Yeah, still really bittering. I mean, that blackstrap molasses definitely comes through. That sweetness comes through. A combination of that brown sugar, vanilla, with that little bit of blackstrap molasses is definitely present here. And there's the nice kind of bittering to it with that sweetness on the other end of things. So that bittering is really still coming through. I'm not getting much salt on it. But yeah, I mean, it smells and almost feels like when you smell it, it has this density to it. Like it's going to be a hefty beer. A little bit thicker than what I assumed based off of the pour. Let's dive in. Cheers. That's a dense beer. And man, this beer is sweet, but it needs it. This is probably one of the more sweeter versions of this base beer. I'm almost guaranteeing that the base of this beer stays remarkably true to what Marcus at Weathered Souls kind of envisioned when he kind of put this beer out there. But then those additions of that molasses, which in and of itself isn't all that overly sweet, at least traditional blackstrap molasses. But once you combine that vanilla and all the other portions of the beer, what's in that beer in there, the adjuncts that are in their beer, it just adds an added layer of sweetness that takes an inherently bittering, very aggressive Russian Imperial Stout for all intents and purposes, and makes it, for me, something a little bit more explosive in a very positive way. It's still bittering. The hops are coming to a head. Even a little bit of that spice in the blackstrap molasses adds to that bitterness. The roasted malts add to that. It's got a beautiful mouthfeel to it. It's about as thick as you can get without adding an extra C to thick. It's a positive. Because it has this nice density, still lends itself to being drinkable. And then once you start adding those other adjuncts in there, the vanilla, the blackstrap molasses, the brown sugar, those kind of things, that's that added sweetness I think is needed for this level of bitterness to balance it off to where I really, really get down with it. That's the thing. The beer base in and of itself is more Old Rasputin than it is pastry stout. Not that I'm a pastry stout junkie, but I like my Russian Imperial Stouts to skew less bittering than Old Rasputin. Courage's Courage Russian Imperial Stout. Sorry, burps. Talking about the Black Albans of the world. Those kind of beers are Russian Imperial Stouts through and through, but they're just nearly as bittering and as Americanized version of Old Rasputin. That's where this one, or this whole base beer, kind of comes in and then leans heavily towards that kind of beer. When you add those sweetened adjuncts on here, I think it adds more balance to the beer, to be perfectly honest with you. It ends up being a little bit more exciting, at least for this guy. So yeah, I dig this. This is probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite, Black is Beautiful beer. This and I think the Magnify. Those are the two that really did it for me. And that one had vanilla and lactose added. So it's one of those things where there's that added sweetness. Not that I want an overly sweet beer, but when they're this bittering, it's very much welcome. So let's talk about it. It's just one of the better Black and Beautiful beers. Yeah, I don't like to do that, man. I just like to say, hey, these are for a good cause. You should be buying it. It shouldn't be a a popularity contest or a beauty contest and be like, this one's better than the other one. But in all grand scheme of things, this is probably one of my more favorite ones. But in the even grander scheme of things, you should be buying these regardless. Good cause. Definitely worth a purchase. And there you go. Another review in the books. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Down there if you want to talk about it. Massive Beers. If you want to check me out, do the social media stuff. Beer Massive. Want to check me out doing the whole podcasting thing. Thank you very much, Kyle, for sending this off. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the review. Hopefully enjoying a little Black is Beautiful right now. Hopefully see you next time. Cheers.